I still remember that morning so clearly, sitting in the examination room under the faintly cold glow of the fluorescent light above, my hand unconsciously clutching the edge of my coat. My heart was beating so fast it felt like the sound might fill the silence of the room. On the ultrasound screen, a blurry shape flickered just a few trembling gray lines. But to me, it was a miracle. "Congratulations, Bianca," the doctor said, her voice so warm I nearly burst into tears right there. "You're already at 13 weeks. Everything looks stable. The heartbeat is strong." And she paused, smiling as she looked at me. "It's a girl." I turned to Victor and saw his eyes glistening. His hand found mine, squeezing tight, as though if he let go, the moment might vanish. He whispered, his voice hoarse, "We're going to have a daughter. Bianca, a real daughter." Just those few words made my heart overflow. I pressed my free hand against my stomach, still flat beneath the loose dress, and imagined the tiny life stirring inside. 3 long years of disappointments, of one heartbreaking miscarriage that nearly robbed me of the courage to hope again. Yet here I was, hearing our baby's heartbeat, saying words I thought I'd lost forever. Miracle. We hadn't told anyone yet. Not my best friend Sophie, not Victor's parents, not even my sister in Portland. We were cautious, as if speaking too soon might shatter the fragile spell. But now, with the doctor confirming that the second trimester had begun, that the heartbeat was strong, I knew it was time to share. "We should tell them," I said as we stepped out of the clinic. The June sun poured down, golden and warm, as if celebrating just for us. Victor nodded, that half-smile on his lips I'd loved since college. "Mom's been asking 100 times why we don't visit more. She's going to cry her eyes out." He was right. I knew Evelyn, my mother-in-law, had been waiting for this day for years. And yet, deep inside, I couldn't shake a flicker of unease. She had always wanted things her way. When we married, which house to buy, even what I should do with my career in architecture. I told myself this time would be different. "I suppose Richard will open one of his prized bottles," I teased, mentioning my father-in-law. Victor laughed. "Of course. And then Mom will start planning everything from the crib to the blankets, down to the paint color for the nursery." I laughed with him, not realizing those half-joking words would later prove prophetic. That weekend, we drove 3 hours up to Harborcliff, the seaside town where Victor grew up. The highway stretched between deep green trees, the wind carrying a trace of salt from the ocean. I leaned my head against the window, hand resting on my belly. Excitement and unease twining together. The Ellingtons' old house came into view. Perched on a slope facing the sea, its gray tiled roof and wide windows gleaming in the light. Evelyn was waiting on the steps, Richard behind her, his arms folded and face glowing. "The instant," Victor said, "Bianca and I are expecting," Evelyn burst into tears and hugged me tight. "Oh my goodness, a grandchild at last," she cried, her voice trembling with joy. "A girl. Oh child, this is the greatest gift from God." Richard wasted no time opening a bottle of fine whiskey, pouring glasses as he said, "We'll need to prepare a room for her. Everything should be ready for when you come here to visit." I smiled, filled with simple happiness. But in Evelyn's tear-filled eyes, I glimpsed something else, not only joy, but ownership. She had already begun saying "our baby" instead of "your daughter." I shook the thought away, telling myself I was being oversensitive. Victor, meanwhile, nodded eagerly to everything his mother said, as if nothing was amiss. That evening, we gathered around the dining table. Fresh seafood gleamed under the warm golden light. I bit into a piece of crusty bread, feeling lighter, believing I had finally been embraced. But as the meal went on, Evelyn began listing what we would need: an Italian crib, a European stroller, the newborn wardrobe she had already picked out. She spoke with a certainty that left little space for anyone else's decision. I glanced at Victor, hoping he would step in, but he only smiled, his eyes shining as he listened. "You'll spend Christmas here in Harbor Cliff." "Bianca," Evelyn said, her hand resting lightly on mine. "By then, your belly will be big and traveling would be dangerous." "We'll take care of you here." I hesitated, then forced a smile. "We still have plenty of time to figure that out." On the drive back to the city, Victor held my hand, his voice full of delight. "See? What were you worried about? They're even happier than I imagined." I leaned against his shoulder, swallowing the unease that was slowly growing inside me. Yes, they were happy. But was that happiness truly for me and Victor, or for themselves, as if the baby inside me had belonged to them all along? I stayed silent. Beneath my ribs, a small flutter reminded me that I was not alone. There was a life waiting for me to protect it. For a fleeting moment, I thought, as long as I have this child, everything will be all right. After that trip to Harbor Cliff, I thought everything would settle, that sharing the good news would bring Victor and me closer together, not the opposite. But I was wrong. The Ellingtons' joy quickly turned into a steady stream of instructions, suggestions, and interference. So subtle at first that I barely noticed. The phone calls started multiplying. At first, once a week. Then every few days. Eventually, almost daily. I would be in the middle of sketching a design at the office when Victor's phone lit up with Mom. Without hesitation, he would step out into the hallway, lowering his voice. When he returned, he always carried a new directive. "Mom says you should switch to a different iron supplement," or "Mom thinks you shouldn't walk so much. It might tire you out." At first, I laughed it off. After all, wasn't that just care and concern? But soon it became heavy, suffocating. Each time I pushed back, Victor would repeat the same phrase. "My mom only wants the best." He didn't see how the repetition itself was stealing away my sense of agency over my own body, my own choices. One September evening, after a long day at work with my feet swollen from standing, Victor set a glass of almond milk in front of me. "Mom says this is good for your bones. Drink up." I lifted my head from the blueprints, frowning. "You know I hate almond milk, but Mom said." I put my pen down, cutting him off. "Victor, I'm carrying our child." "Not your mother's." The words slipped out faster than I intended, leaving a thick silence behind. His gaze hardened, defensive. "So now you think she's controlling us. You always twist it that way," he said, his voice taut. "They're just trying to help, Bianca. Not everyone grows up in a broken home like you." His words sliced through me like a blade. My throat closed, heat flooding my face. I had trusted that Victor understood the scars of my childhood, those years of watching my parents fight until they finally walked away. And yet here he was, wielding that pain against me. I said nothing, just rose quietly, leaving the untouched almond milk behind. We didn't speak for 2 days. On the third night, he came to bed and placed a tentative hand on my belly, where the baby was kicking softly. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I shouldn't have said that. I just want the best for her." I nodded, but the sting lingered. Apologies were easy. The shadow of his mother's presence still lived in every word he spoke. Sophie, my best friend, was the first to notice the change. One Saturday afternoon, we sat in our usual cafe, the air fragrant with waffles and roasted coffee. She sipped her cappuccino, studying me. "You don't seem like yourself lately," she said. "Is something wrong? Or is it just the pregnancy?" I hesitated, then finally confessed. Since we told Victor's parents, he's different. It's like they have invisible strings pulling him. His mom calls constantly, sends things, even picks out cribs without asking me. Sophie frowned. "And you just let it happen. You and Victor should be deciding together. This is your baby." "I know," I sighed. "But every time I bring it up, he says I'm too sensitive, too paranoid. He even claims I'm jealous because I never had a family like his. Sophie reached across the table, her hand steady on mine. Bianca, listen to me. That isn't normal care. That's control. And Victor needs to understand the difference before it goes too far. I forced a smile, knowing she was right. Yet a part of me still wanted to believe Victor was only overwhelmed, that he would eventually see the boundaries for himself. By October, my belly was showing clearly, slowing my steps. At the firm, the Riverside project was entering its final phase, and I wanted to finish before maternity leave. But whenever I came home late, Victor frowned. You should slow down. Mom says pregnant women shouldn't stress so much. I drew a deep breath. Victor, this is my project from the start. I need to finish it. After that, I'll rest. He paused, then shook his head slightly. Mom's worried about you. I'm worried too, again, Mom. Those two syllables over and over like a refrain I couldn't escape. I wanted to scream that I didn't need another Margaret, that I needed a husband who stood beside me, not a speaker echoing his mother's voice. Instead, I stayed silent, watching the golden leaves fall slowly outside the window. The Ellingtons' visits grew more frequent. At first, just weekends. Then nearly every 2 weeks. Each time, Evelyn arrived with bags full of things, hand-knit blankets, parenting books, jars of herbal remedies she swore were better than any vitamins. One Sunday afternoon, I walked into the living room to find Victor and his parents already making plans. Richard had cleared out his study in Harborcliff to prepare a nursery. Evelyn beamed as she announced, "We've already ordered the crib. Everything will be ready for when you visit." I managed to smile, but unease stirred deep inside me. They spoke as though the baby already belonged to them, as if I were just the vessel for a family treasure. That night, lying in bed, I turned to Victor. "Don't you think they're going too far?" I asked. He sighed. "Bianca, they're just excited. It's their first grandchild, but can't you see they're making decisions for us?" His face tightened as he rolled away. "You always see things negatively. They're only trying to help. If you can't accept that, maybe the problem is you." I froze. In the darkness, tears slid hot down my cheeks. I turned my back to him, arms wrapped protectively around my belly, whispering to my daughter, "As long as you have me. Lydia, you'll be safe." As my belly grew, the conversations in our home shifted into something else. No longer small talk, but quiet arguments. Not shouting, not slamming doors. No, it was subtler than that, the thick silences. The sighs that both of us could hear, the half-finished sentences that left a bitter taste in the air. I began to notice that Victor no longer looked at me the way he once had. In the early days, after we found out I was pregnant, he used to rest his hand on my stomach each night, smiling at the first little flutters of movement. But now, his eyes strayed more often to the phone, and his hand where messages from his mother seemed endless. Sometimes I caught him sitting in his office for hours, voice lowered on the phone, as though he had something to hide. One afternoon, I was folding tiny baby clothes, white and pale blue ones, that Sophie had given me. I placed each one neatly into the dresser, my heart full of quiet anticipation. Suddenly, Victor came in, carrying a large cardboard box. "For my parents," he said, with a hint of pride. "It's the crib and changing table they ordered from Italy. Top of the line." I looked at the enormous, ornate crib, heavy with carved detail, utterly mismatched with the simple, cozy room I had spent weeks putting together. "But we already picked out a crib," I said softly. Victor shrugged. "Mom didn't like that one. She said this is safer and prettier." The words struck like a tiny blade knot, drawing blood, but throbbing all the same. I stayed quiet for a moment, then said slowly, "Victor, don't you see? We're letting other people make every decision. This is our child. This room is for our daughter, not for your mother." He set the box down, his eyes hardening. "There you go again. Why do you have to turn everything into a problem?" "They only want the best for her. The best for her," I repeated, my voice trembling. "What about the best for me? For us?" The air thickened between us. Victor sighed, turned away, and left me standing there with a crib I had never wanted. From that day, I began to pull back. I no longer shared the little things with him. The joy when Lydia kicked harder for the first time. The worry when back pain kept me awake through the night. I learned to smile to myself, then bury those feelings in silence. But Sophie was not so easily avoided. One afternoon, she showed up at our apartment with a bag of pastries and her familiar probing gaze. "You've lost weight," she said the moment she saw me. I forced a laugh. "I'm eating fine, really. Bianca, don't lie to me. I know when something's wrong. You've never been able to hide it from me, and so?" With the smell of butter in the air and rain tapping gently at the window, I broke down. I told Sophie about the endless phone calls, the packages arriving without my say. The way Victor repeated his mother's words like a machine. Sophie gripped my hand tightly. "You're not crazy, Bianca. You just want respect. And you deserve it. If Victor can't see that, then you have to make him see." I nodded, but inside, I was torn. I had always believed love could carry us through anything. Yet now, love felt like a rope stretched too thin, one tug away from snapping. By November, I had wrapped up my work. I handed the Riverside files to my boss and officially began maternity leave. It should have been the most peaceful time. Instead, an unease shadowed everything. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, Victor came in looking grim. "Bianca, I've been thinking. We should go to Harbor Cliff early this Christmas. Maybe mid-December. It'll be safer that way." I froze. Safer. "Victor, my hospital and doctor are here. I've been seeing them for months. Why change now?" He took a deep breath. "Mom spoke with a doctor in Harbor Cliff. He's very good, and he can take over your care immediately." I stared at him. "Did you just say your mother contacted a doctor on my behalf?" Victor looked away. "She just wanted to make sure. And I think she's right. The weather can be unpredictable. What if no, Victor?" I cut him off, my voice sharper than I knew it could be. "I will not change doctors in my final month just because your mother decided so. This is my body. This is my child." His brow furrowed, his voice rising. "You always think my mom is controlling everything. But maybe you're the stubborn one too wrapped up in your pride to think about the babies." Safety? The accusation left me hollow. I didn't answer, just turned away, pulling the blanket over my head. Tears seeped hot into the pillow. In the dark, I heard Victor leave the room. The door closing softly but cold as ice. The days that followed were wrapped in silence. Victor still cared about what I ate, what I drank, but it felt more like duty than love. An invisible wall had risen between us so tall. I no longer knew how to climb over it. I found myself talking more to my daughter instead. Each time Lydia kicked, I stroked my belly and whispered, "Don't worry, sweetheart. No matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." In those moments, a quiet calm filled me. But at the same time, I understood something clearly. The distance between Victor and me was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a real fracture widening, threatening to swallow everything we once had. December settled over the city like a heavy blanket. Each morning I woke to windows fogged with frost, my swollen feet barely fitting into the shoes I used to wear with ease. I counted the weeks left until my due date, just over 3 weeks more, and I would finally see Lydia's face, hear her first cry. But instead of anticipation, an unnamed heaviness weighed down my chest. Victor grew more distant with each passing day. He spent less time at home, his phone burning with calls from Harborcliff. Once I walked into the living room mid-conversation and heard him say, "Yes, I know. I'll convince her. We can't let things get risky." I froze in the doorway, my heart dropping. He ended the call quickly when he saw me. "Just Mom worrying again," he said, eyes averted. I didn't respond, only retreated to the bedroom. In the mirror, I saw my own red-rimmed eyes and the curve of my belly where my daughter grew stronger each day. And I thought, if anyone should worry about this baby, it should be me, not them. On December 20th, the first snow fell, blanketing our street in white. I was folding soft baby towels in the living room when Victor entered, his face rigid in the gray winter light. "Bianca," he said, "I think we should go to Harborcliff tonight. The storm will get worse this weekend. If we don't leave now, we might be stuck here." I laid the towel down, inhaling deeply. "Victor, I've told you I'm delivering at St. Mary's. With Dr. Patel. I'm not changing that at the last minute." His brow furrowed, his voice urgent. "You're too stubborn, Bianca." Mom said, "Enough." I cut in, my heart pounding. "It's always your mother. But this is my body, my child. I won't let anyone else decide for me." He was silent for a beat, then spoke coldly, like steel. "If you won't go, then I will. I can't let Christmas pass while my parents sit waiting alone." I stared at him, disbelief choking me. "You'd leave me here when I could go into labor any day." His eyes flickered with hesitation, but his shoulders stayed square. "You'll be fine. Sophie's here. And first babies are usually late." The words stabbed into me, both careless and cruel, echoing his mother's voice rather than his own. My throat tightened, but I forced out the question, trembling. "You'd really abandon me, Victor?" "Abandon your daughter." Silence fell. Only the slow tick of the clock filled the room. "At last," he murmured. "Maybe we need time to think. I'll go to Harborcliff for Christmas. Afterward, I'll come back." I watched as he packed. Every shirt folded, every zipper closed, sounded like a nail sealing something between us. He was still the man I had once loved, once trusted. But now he was choosing his parents over me at the very moment I needed him most. The next morning, I stood at the window, arms wrapped around my belly. The Ellingtons' car waited below, Richard at the wheel, Evelyn waving in her thick winter coat. Victor came back inside, his expression softening briefly. "It's not too late, Bianca. You can still come." I shook my head, tears brimming. "I'm not going." "I can't." His face tightened, then hardened again. He bent to kiss my cheek, a perfunctory gesture, stripped of warmth. "Call me if anything happens," he said. And then he was gone. I stood there, watching the car roll down the snowy street. In that moment, I felt it clearly. A cord between us had snapped. Long and irreparable. The apartment was silent after he left. I wandered through the baby's room, touching each item: the ornate crib his mother had chosen, the tiny wardrobe stuffed with new clothes. Everything was perfect by their standards. And yet, my heart felt hollow. That night, I sat alone on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, my hand resting on my belly. Lydia kicked gently, a reminder that I was not alone. I whispered, "It may just be the two of us now. But I promise I will never leave you." And in that moment, I knew. Once Victor chose to walk away like this, some things could never go back to the way they were. By the afternoon of December 23rd, the snow had thickened. I pulled back the curtains and looked out at the street, now swallowed in white. The few cars that passed had their headlights on, wheels turning slowly, leaving tracks that were quickly buried beneath fresh flakes. Inside the apartment, everything was so quiet I could hear the steady tick of the wall clock. I sat on the sofa, one hand rubbing the curve of my belly, where Lydia shifted softly. Victor had been gone for 3 days. He called every day, but I rarely picked up, letting the messages pile up instead. Each time his name lit up my screen, my chest ached. He had chosen to leave me, and nothing could erase that. Around 7 o'clock, as I was folding tiny baby clothes, a sharp pain shot through my lower belly. I froze, clutching myself, breath shallow. It wasn't like the usual backaches, it had rhythm, intensity. I glanced at the clock, 7:05. 15 minutes later, it returned. Fear began to creep in. Maybe they were just Braxton Hicks the practice contractions Dr. Patel had warned me about. But I also remembered her words, "If they come steadily, get ready." I grabbed a notepad. 7:05, 7:20, 7:36. The contractions weren't unbearable yet, but enough to leave me sweating. I reached for my phone, my finger hovering over Victor's name. One tap, and he would know. He might even leave the Ellingtons' Christmas dinner to come back. But I stopped. A voice inside me whispered, he wasn't here when you needed him most. Why let him swoop in now as the savior? I dropped the phone back onto the table and dialed Sophie instead. "You okay?" She answered, her voice taut the moment I said the words, contractions starting. "I think it might be real this time. But the snow is heavy. I'm coming right now," she cut in, no hesitation. "Don't move. Don't drive. Just wait." The firmness in her voice steadied me, easing the panic in my chest. Outside, the wind howled, lashing against the windows. I paced slowly through the living room, breathing deep the way Dr. Patel had taught me. Each time a contraction hit, I gripped the table edge, counting until it passed. My phone lit up again. A message from Victor. "Bianca, I've been calling all day. Are you okay? The snow is bad. I'm worried." A second followed. "If anything happens, please call me. I'll come back no matter what." I stared at the screen, emotions twisting inside me. But instead of replying, I pressed it dark again. I couldn't let this late panic become his excuse for forgiving himself. 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Sophie stood there, cheeks flushed red from the wind, hair speckled with snow. "Let's go," she said simply. "My car's out front. We need to get to the hospital before the storm worsens." I leaned on her as we made our way down the stairs. Each step slowed by the tightening in my belly. Outside, snowflakes fell thick and blinding, covering even the sidewalks. Sophie opened the passenger door and guided me into the seat before hurrying around to the driver's side. The engine rumbled. The car edged onto the snow-choked road. Every time the tire slipped, I clenched the armrest, breathing carefully through the pain. Sophie glanced at me, voice steady and sure. "Don't worry, Bianca. I'm here. You're not alone." The glowing yellow lights of St. Mary's finally appeared through the storm, rising like a fortress against the snow. Nurses rushed out with a gurney, helping me inside. Voices shouted, shoes pounded against linoleum, antiseptics stung the air. But all of it blurred as another contraction doubled me over. Deep breaths, "Bianca. You're doing so well." I lifted my head. It was drpatel.com face, kind eyes. "We'll monitor closely. You're safe." In the delivery room, exhaustion and tension weighed on me in equal measure. The monitor beeped steadily, Lydia's heartbeat filling the space like a reassuring rhythm. Sophie stood at my side, her hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt. "You okay?" she asked. Tears spilled down my cheeks. "Without you, I don't know what I'd do." And I realized some people show up not because of obligation, but because of real love. At 11 o'clock, my phone buzzed again from the bag on the chair. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Victor, probably frantic now. Realizing the storm was no longer just outside, but raging inside our marriage too. I whispered to Sophie, "Don't give me the phone." "Not now. She nodded, squeezing my hand harder. Outside, the snow kept falling. But in here, I had only one focus left: to bring my daughter safely into the world, with every ounce of strength and love I had. The steady rhythm of the monitor echoed through the room, Lydia's tiny heartbeat like a distant drum pulling me through the pain. I clutched Sophie's hand, sweat soaking my hairline. Each contraction tore me apart, leaving my breath ragged. My vision blurred with tears. "You're doing so well, Bianca," Dr. Patel said, her voice calm, almost unnervingly steady. "Only 3 centimeters. We still have a way to go." The words left me both unsettled and relieved. At least Lydia was safe. I bit my lip, trying to focus on the breathing I had practiced in class. But each wave of pain shattered reason like glass. Sophie dabbed my forehead with a warm cloth, whispering, "Look at me. Your baby's strong. You'll be okay. Just a little longer." I nodded, though we both knew a little longer could stretch into hours. The phone in Sophie's bag buzzed again. I knew it was Victor. He had called more than 10 times since we arrived. Sophie glanced at me, waiting for my choice. I shook my head. "I don't want to hear him," I panted. "Okay," Sophie whispered, sliding the phone aside. Inside me rose a storm of contradictions: pain, anger, emptiness. The man who once swore he would hold my hand through this moment, where was he now? Still at his parents' table, struggling to drive through the snow. Or perhaps still unaware of what he had already lost. Time blurred. 5 centimeters. 7. I lost track of how many contractions passed. Only the waves remained, relentless, stripping me of strength. I screamed, then fell silent, my breath rasping as though I were running through an endless winter night. Through the haze, a memory surfaced: Victor's embrace when we first learned I was pregnant. The tear that slid down his cheek as he gazed at the tiny shape on the ultrasound screen. Back then, I believed love could carry us through anything. But some distances aren't created by outsiders or circumstance. They come from choice. And Victor had chosen. "It's time, Bianca," Dr. Patel's voice cut through, firm but gentle. "You're at 10. Ready?" I nodded, tears streaming. Sophie squeezed my hand, her eyes unwavering. The first push felt like my lungs would burst. The second ripped a scream from me, my whole body trembling. The sounds around me faded into a blur. Only Lydia's heartbeat and Sophie's steady whisper anchored me. "Come on, Bianca. She's almost here." Then it came, a cry, sharp and pure, piercing through the fog. I sobbed, shaking, as the doctor placed my daughter on my chest. Lydia was so small, I feared she might break under my touch. Yet the warmth of her body, the fragile beat of her heart, told me the undeniable truth: I was no longer alone. "Hello, my love," I whispered, tears soaking my pillow. "Welcome to the world." Sophie wept too, leaning close, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. "You did it, Bianca. You're amazing." But I didn't look at her, or at anyone else. Every sense I had was consumed by Lydia, her eyelids shut tight, her tiny hand curling around my finger, as if to say, "I'm here." Mama. When they wheeled me to recovery, I was too exhausted to keep my eyes open. Sophie tidied the room, phoned my sister Jenna. Through the haze, I caught her words: "Mother and baby are fine. She's healthy." Victor's face flashed in my mind. Perhaps he had realized now Lydia was born without him. Perhaps he was shouting into his phone or desperately trying to get back. But none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was that Lydia and I had crossed the threshold together. Just the two of us on a snowy Christmas night. As the ward quieted, Sophie dozed in the chair beside me. I turned to the bassinet, where Lydia slept peacefully, cheeks rosy in the soft light. I whispered, a vow etched into my heart: "From now on, I'll be your anchor. No matter who comes or goes, You'll never face this world alone." The gentle rhythm of Lydia's breathing was the sweetest answer I could ever receive. Morning light filtered weakly through the thin hospital curtains, soft as a whisper. I opened my eyes, the dull ache in my abdomen still lingering, my body spent as though I'd run an endless marathon. Beside me, Lydia slept soundly in her bassinet, her face rosy, her breathing even. Just looking at her was enough to dissolve every ounce of exhaustion. Sophie had gone to get coffee, leaving a note on the bedside table. "If the nurses need anything, just press the call button." "I'll be right back." I smiled faintly, grateful for her steadfastness. Then came the hurried footsteps in the hallway. A man's voice, familiar and hoarse, rang out, "Urgent. Where's my wife? Where's Bianca? I need to see her now." My chest clenched. I didn't need anyone to tell me it was Victor. The nurse on duty stood at the doorway, gently holding it closed. I heard her calm reply, "I'm sorry, Mr. Ellington. She delivered only yesterday. She needs rest." "I'm not sure she's ready to see you." "Not ready? I'm her husband." "Where's my daughter?" His voice cracked, taut as a stretched string. I clutched the bedsheet, torn between wanting to cry out and wanting to bury myself deeper under the blanket. I had once ached so much for him to be here when Lydia arrived. But now that he was, all I felt was coldness. The door opened a crack, and I caught a glimpse of him in the hallway, his coat dusted with snow, face drawn and weary, eyes bloodshot. He looked as if he'd run through the night to get here. But instead of meeting his gaze, I turned toward Lydia. "She needs rest." Sophie's voice rang firm. She had returned. "If you really care, let Bianca be. I just want to see my daughter," Victor pleaded. Just once. My chest ached, but I kept silent. I didn't have the strength to open my heart just yet. At last the nurse had to insist that Victor leave the postnatal ward. His footsteps echoed down the hallway, fading until they were gone. I exhaled not from relief, but from the sting of yet another wound carved into me. Sophie set a cup of hot coffee on the table and sat beside me. "Are you okay?" I shook my head, eyes burning. "I don't know. Part of me wants to run out there, put Lydia in his arms. But another part remembers too clearly how he left me." Sophie clasped my hand, steady as always. "You don't owe him that, Bianca. Not now. Not like this." That night, as the hospital settled into silence, I opened my phone. 34 missed calls. 62 messages from Victor. "Are you and the baby okay?" I came to the hospital. "They wouldn't let me in. Please, I just want to see Lydia. I'm sorry. Please, give me one more chance." The screen glowed in the darkness. I stared at it, then shut it off. No reply. I no longer had the strength to endure empty promises. The next morning, Dr. Patel came in to check on me. "You're recovering well, Bianca. The baby's strong, feeding beautifully. If nothing changes, you can be discharged tomorrow." I nodded, both relieved and uneasy. Leaving the hospital also meant leaving behind the walls that shielded me from Victor. I knew he would come to the apartment. When I shared my worry with Sophie, she answered firmly, "If you want, I'll stay with you a few more days. I won't let him disturb you." I smiled weakly. "Thank you. I think I'll need that." That afternoon, as I cradled Lydia, pale light filtered through the frosted window, gilding the fine strands of her hair. I whispered to her, "My love, I don't know what the future will bring, but I promise I'll always protect you from every storm out there." Lydia stirred, her lips pursing as though forming the tiniest smile. My heart softened, overflowing with a love beyond words. In that moment, I knew, whether Victor returned or not, Lydia and I would go on. And this time, the journey was mine to choose. I didn't open the door to Victor again after that confrontation. But he didn't disappear. Every day, A new bouquet appeared on the doorsteps, sometimes with a card that read only, "I'm sorry," or "Please give me another chance." I gathered them into the largest vase I owned, not out of forgiveness, but because I couldn't stand to see wilted flowers strewn about like old wounds. "You're too soft-hearted," Sophie scolded. I shook my head. "No, I just don't want Lydia growing up in a home full of dead flowers." Then one afternoon, a message came from Victor. "I've rented an apartment nearby. I won't live with my parents anymore. I start therapy next week. I know words mean nothing, so I'll let actions prove it." I read the line again and again, unsettled. Victor had once mocked therapy, calling it paying someone to repeat what you already know. But now he had chosen it for himself. I didn't reply, but I saved the message as proof at the very least. He was trying in the weeks that followed. Victor began coming 3 times a week to take Lydia 4 walks around the neighborhood. The first time I stood at the window, my heart pounding as I watched him carry her. His expression was gentler than I'd ever seen. I nearly ran down to take her back, but then Lydia giggled, waving her tiny hands in the air. That night, Victor sent me a photo. Lydia, in her pink knit hat, fast asleep on his shoulder. The caption was only, "Thank you for trusting me." I didn't respond, but warm tears soaked my pillow anyway. Slowly, we slipped into a new rhythm. Mornings, I mixed Lydia's bottles. Afternoons, Victor stopped by to take her out. I began working from home again, while he focused on opening his own law office. We didn't live together, but his steady presence made the apartment feel less empty. One day, Sophie remarked, "Have you noticed? He hasn't mentioned his parents once lately." I froze. She was right. For months, he hadn't pushed me to take Lydia to Harbor Cliff. No secret phone calls. No shadow of Evelyn hovering over every decision. In April, when Lydia turned 4 months old, Victor handed me a sheet of paper. "This is my therapy schedule," he said carefully. "I want you to know I'm serious. Not to brag, but so you see, I'm learning how to live differently." I scanned the dense calendar boxes, surprised. "You're really going this regularly?" He nodded. "The doctor says I've been too dependent on my family, not independent enough. I need to learn how to separate from the man, more importantly. How to put you and Lydia first." In his eyes, I saw sincerity. But the scar inside me hadn't healed enough to let me trust quickly. I only nodded. "Keep going." That evening, after Victor returned Lydia, I carried her to bed and watched her drift into sleep. Outside, the snow had melted, green shoots pushing through the soil of the flower boxes. I realized then, since Victor had moved out, the air in the apartment had changed. No more hushed phone calls, no more Evelyn's shadow. Just me, Lydia, and a rare stretch of peace. And yet, within that peace, I still felt a quiet knock on the door of my heart. Could I give him another chance? I smoothed Lydia's soft hair and whispered, "My love, we won't rush. If your father truly changes, time will prove it. Only then will I know how to move forward." Summer arrived with long golden afternoons, so different from the frozen white winter when Lydia was born. I sat on the apartment balcony, watching her crawl clumsily across the small rug, chirping like a little bird. Each laugh from her seemed to wash away a little more of the bitterness I had carried for months. Victor came right on time, as he always did now. He knocked gently, never entering without being invited. In his hands was a cloth bag filled with wooden toys he had carved in his spare evenings. Sitting on the rug, he opened his arms, and Lydia squealed, crawling toward him with hands outstretched. I stood still, watching the scene with a mixture of strangeness and familiarity. Strange, because I was still not used to seeing a patient, gentle Victor. Familiar, because the memory of the man who once wept at the sound of his daughter's heartbeat on the ultrasound came rushing back. "Can I try feeding her?" Victor asked, hesitant as though afraid of overstepping. I nodded, handing him the tiny spoon and bowl of thin porridge. Carefully, he offered each spoonful, chuckling when Lydia stuck out her tongue and spilled half onto her shirt. In that moment, I realized he was no longer the man who leaned on his parents for every decision. No longer the man who abandoned me in a snowstorm. He was learning to be a father slowly, piece by piece. That evening, after Victor returned from taking Lydia on her walk, I invited him to stay for dinner. For the first time in months, we sat at the same table without walls of silence or anger between us. I made a simple seafood pasta. He brought a bottle of wine, not the kind his mother used to choose for him, but one he had picked himself. I went to the shop, asked the clerk, and chose the lightest one so it wouldn't overpower your cooking, he explained. The words were ordinary, but my throat tightened. How long had it been since he made a choice entirely his own? We ate slowly, talking about Lydia, about work, about the little apartment he was slowly shaping into a home of his own. He told me about therapy, how his doctor encouraged him to keep a journal of fears and triggers. I listened, cautious, but allowing a sliver of space to open inside me. When Lydia had fallen asleep, Victor stood at the door to leave. But before stepping out, he paused, his expression serious. "Bianca, I don't expect you to forget. I only hope you see I'm trying every single day. If one day you can forgive me, I'll be here. And if not, I'll still be here for Lydia." I looked at him for a long time. The anger and pain that had once weighed so heavily were still there, but dulled, worn down by the steady weight of his daily actions. I gave a small nod. "Stay, not to talk, not to ask for anything, just stay. Tonight, we'll both get up when Lydia cries." His eyes lit, but he didn't step closer. He only nodded, as if knowing that his quiet presence was the greatest gift he could give right now. From that night, we settled into a new rhythm. No grand promises, just the simple things. He took Lydia to her checkups. I packed the diaper bag. When I was busy, he came early and cooked. When she pulled herself to standing for the first time, we both snapped dozens of photos one evening. Lydia shrieked with joy as Victor tossed her gently in the air and caught her. I found myself smiling, not the stiff smile of politeness, but something real. I caught his eyes and saw gratitude shining deep within. And for the first time in a year, I didn't look away. On Lydia's first birthday, I hosted a small gathering in the apartment. Just Sophie, my sister Jenna, who flew in from Seattle, and Victor. A simple cake, a few balloons taped to the wall. When Lydia smashed her little hand into the frosting, laughter filled the room, warm and bright, spilling into every corner. In that moment, I realized this was family. Not perfect, not the fairy tale I once dreamed of, but real. Alive and ours. After the party, Victor stayed to help clean up. We stood together on the balcony, city lights glittering in the distance. He drew a deep breath and said quietly, "Bianca, I wouldn't dare call this a new beginning unless you're ready. But if you'll allow it, I'd like to try dating you again. Not as husband and wife, just to people, getting to know each other." I turned to him. In his eyes, there was no demand, only patience and hope. After a pause, I answered, "Maybe we can try. But this time, everything must move slowly, step by step. For Lydia too, show her that family means not empty promises, but real presence." Victor nodded, his lips trembling as though holding back joy. That night, as I laid Lydia in her crib, she clasped my finger in her tiny hand. I whispered, "My love, we're not going back to what we were. But maybe, just maybe, we're walking into something new where your father and I learn how to begin again. For you?" And in the soft rhythm of Lydia's breathing, I heard the answer. For the first time in so long. My heart was not only heavy with pain, held a flicker of hope. Asterisk. Perhaps what lingers after everything is not just Victor's return, but Bianca's courageous journey from loneliness in the snowstorm to giving birth alone and then slowly learning to open her heart to a new chance. True love sometimes is not found in sweet promises, but in the quiet patience of showing up day after day in small, steady ways. Thank you for listening with Snail Story. If this story touched you, please leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe so we can continue walking together on journeys of healings, lowly but filled with hope. Discharge day came faster than I expected. That morning, the sky was heavy and gray. Snow still piled thick along the sidewalks, but the road leading out of the hospital gate had been cleared. Sophie drove, and I sat in the back seat with Lydia nestled in her tiny car seat. A strange feeling pressed into my chest, relief to be heading home, but also the unease of knowing the world outside was waiting demanding. Inescapable, the little apartment welcomed the three of us with familiar warmth. I laid Lydia in her crib, watched her stir softly and sink back into sleep. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it. The Christmas tree still glowing, the presents still under its branches. The only difference was that I no longer imagined opening them with Victor. Let me unpack. You just lie down and rest, Sophie said firmly. I knew she was trying to fill the silence stretching between us, the silence that carried Victor's name. I had just lowered myself onto the couch when the doorbell rang. The sound was familiar, but my whole body tensed. Sophie looked at me, silently asking. I gave a small nod. She opened the door, and there he was. Victor looked more worn than when I last saw him outside the hospital hallway, stubble covering his jaw. Dark circles etched beneath his eyes, broad shoulders slumped under an invisible weight. In his hands was a bouquet of white carnations, the flowers I had once loved for their simplicity. Bianca's voice cracked, eyes glistening as they landed on Lydia in the crib. She's beautiful. I stepped between him and the crib, my voice hoarse. What are you doing here? To apologize. And to see my daughter. His words faltered, as if every syllable might shatter the fragile air between us. The room was so tense I could hear the tick of the clock. Lydia's steady breathing in her sleep was a stark contrast to the storm whirling inside me. You left, I said, each word heavy. You abandoned me. At the very moment I needed you most. Victor bowed his head, clutching the bouquet tighter. I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But please don't take away my chance with her. A bitter laugh escaped me. A chance. Did you think about my chance when I drove to the hospital through a snowstorm? When I endured every contraction alone? When I pushed through the fear with only Sophie holding my hand? Where were you then, Victor? He lifted his gaze, eyes red. I was weak. I listened to my parents. I was afraid, and I chose wrong. But I'm here now, and I won't run again. Sophie stepped forward, standing solidly beside me. Victor, Bianca just gave birth. She doesn't need more pressure. If you really want to make things right, start by respecting the space she needs. Victor turned back to me, ignoring Sophie's words. Bianca, give me a chance. Just once let me hold her. I studied him for a long time. In those eyes, I saw desperation tangled with real love. But the wound inside me was still raw, not something a single plea could mend. Slowly, I shook my head. Not today, I said softly. Lydia needs quiet, and I need time. The words hit him like a blade. He nodded, stepping back. I'll wait. As long as it takes, I'll wait. He set the bouquet gently on the table, cast one last lingering look at Lydia, then turned and walked out. The door closed behind him, leaving a silence that roared. I collapsed onto the chair, tears spilling freely. Sophie wrapped her arm around me, whispering, "You did the right thing." No one has the right to force your forgiveness before you're ready. but inside me, chaos raged. The image of Victor's desperate eyes clung to me, unshakable. Part of me longed to believe he could change. Another part whispered that sometimes the crack runs too deep to ever be repaired. I turned toward Lydia, her tiny hands lifted gently in her sleep, as though reaching out. By her very existence, she forced me to face the hardest choice, to keep the distance that protected me or to leave open a fragile crack, giving Victor a chance to prove himself. That night, I did not sleep. I sat by her crib, listening to her steady breathing while my own heart wrestled without rest.